In front of me, Tarot Wake. I've been told that this is the correct pronunciation for the last name. DFIR professional, stance instructor.
Yeah.
What else?
That's kind of it, really. I do a lot of gardening. I like animals and I like gardening.
Okay, yeah. I do recall that on your Instagram you have a lot of pictures of.
I like growing things. I like plants. I don't like buildings. I don't like cities, and I don't like being indoors, which is strange considering my job. So there's a little bit of a disconnect that goes on there. But I quite like the fact that most of our work is spent sitting at a computer screen dealing with technology. And then when I'm not doing that, I like to be as far away from as possible.
Now I'm picturing a typical cottage-like place, or is it more like a farm, or you have just a regular house? And
it's all three. So it's not really a regular house. So by UK standards, where I live is it's quite remote. My nearest neighbour is probably 300 metres away. So I live in quite a remote area by UK standards. I mean, if we talk to Australians, no. I'm living in a built-up area, but I've got quite a lot of gardens, which they are now. So it used to be a small holding, so it's 8 acres, and so I've converted part of it to look after some animals. So I've got horses. I used to have a horse; she died. Ponies, donkeys, goats, pigs, and then I've got about half of it converted into gardens.
And still have broadband internet.
And still have broadband internet connectivity.
Fiber or
no, it's not super. So it's only 40 meg, which does depress me a little bit sometimes. But that's the trade-off. It's the trade-off for being able to live somewhere completely remote. So like during COVID, for instance, when everyone was locked down, it was so difficult to me. I've got a massive garden that I can spend a week in.
Yeah, that's certainly it.
That was a significant game. Just being able to
were you always like that? Even as a kid, you were living in...
No, so I grew up in Liverpool. It's a city, so I grew up in the centre of Liverpool, very, very built-up area. I spent my entire life until I was 18 living during most of my life in cities, although my parents liked to travel a lot. We lived abroad quite a bit for work, for my dad's work. Then for my mum, did a PhD study in Brazil. So we spent 6 months living in the Amazon. Quite exciting when I was 16.
Like actually in the jungle?
Actually. Well, not all of it in the jungle. We started off in a town called Itabaraba, in a place called Bahia, which is like northeast Brazil. We spent 2 months there, then we went towards Amazonas, and we stayed in a couple of little villages most of the time.
Wow, that's
quite nice. Yeah,
really
that was fascinating. It was like I was 16, so I probably wasn't. There were situations that I was too young and naive to really appreciate the value of, but I did love the fact that it was like this exciting adventure. And my mum was doing a lot of studies, so I was kind of, a lot of the time it was like, off you go, do your own thing for 3 days and stuff, and I'd just walk up and down the Amazon, and which I really enjoyed. I loved that. I loved, she was doing a PhD in sociology, so we came across like these really weird communities where they didn't have much exposure of Westerners. So this is like 1987. The exposure of Westerners is quite limited at the best of times. I remember we turned up at one village, and at the time I had quite fair blonde hair. And these people walking up to me, like pointing at me, poking me in the eyes to see if their eyes were real. And I'm like, this is surreal. And like these isolated communities, it was just amazing, like the way they lived.
So you were actually visiting tribes?
Yeah. We'd come across these tribes who, I mean, we weren't like first contact. I'm not talking about that. I mean, I'm a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah.
They're not going to allow that.
I think those tribes are well protected anyway.
They are now, especially, yeah. So this...
maybe back in the
so
late 80s.
There were some bizarre situations. Yeah, we weren't... not in Amazonas, but when we were in Bahia, the state in northeastern Brazil, we went to a workers' collective meeting where there were lots of people protesting. There were like 400 people in this room. They were all working on farms. They were upset with the treatment. And the local rancheros, the sort of cowboys, turned up and started shooting at everyone. This is gunfire, everyone's running around, like really overwhelming response. I mean, it did improve quite significantly, but this was like quite a sort of, in hindsight, a reasonably dark period in Brazil's not the worst, but like in their modern history, it wasn't a great time for them. But in Amazonas, it was totally different. The Bahia was a bit more aggressively managed, like with the farmers, and the cowboys were like sort of basically keeping serfs. not quite. I mean, they weren't slaves. I don't mean that sort of level of etc. But they were very badly paid, living in poor communities. Whereas you'd come across these villages in the Amazon, and they had no money, absolutely, but they also had no concept of it. They were just, it was like this really weird approach to life. It was amazing. Very, very communal. So like the entire village were living in a single hut. The concept of things that we, certainly back in the UK or in Liverpool, that I would think of as being the way to live life was very different. It was like that, really.
Yeah, it's super hard even to imagine.
It was, that's exactly it. It's one of those things, I mean, if I'd have tried to imagine it, I'd have got it wrong. And it was just like this amazing experience. I loved it.
And that was, you said it was for 6 months.
6 months,
but you said that you were traveling a lot as a
so
other places.
So most of Europe. So my dad worked for the civil service for a while. We travelled around Europe quite a lot. I spent a lot of time in Amsterdam. I spent probably most of my first 5 years in Amsterdam. Quite interesting, but not really. I wasn't really old enough to remember much of it. I just have like occasional flashes. I've got like memories of like the Vondel Park and stuff like that when I was very little. We travelled around Belgium a lot, Luxembourg, those sorts of countries. That was quite nice. That kind of stopped. So when I started going to school, it tailed off a little bit. So between like 11 to 16, there wasn't much because I was in high school. So they didn't really take me out very much. We just went on holidays. I was mostly camping. And I quite liked, that kind of got me into, I loved being outdoors. I like the countryside. So I was growing up in a very industrialised city. This is the sort of the transition away from, so the UK in this period was going through a very economic decline. Hadn't yet joined the European Union. We were struggling. We were the sick man of Europe, was kind of the, and Liverpool was, it was an old port that no longer was functioning as a port. A very high unemployment. It was a very dirty sort of industrial city. And I used to spend like all my weekends and holidays away in the countryside, enjoying, like, sort of listening to nature.
So
I
like
really
escaping the reality.
And that's kind of
city.
that's kind of been embedded in me ever since. Is that I love. I mean, like here we are in London. If I look outside and there's buildings, you can barely see the sky.
Yeah,
I don't like
especially
that.
here in East London.
Yeah, I feel trapped.
Yeah.
I'm surrounded by these buildings. Whereas if I go home, I can sit there and I can look for 30 kilometers in any direction, and all I see is green trees and stuff, and I like that feeling. Like that openness.
So what you're saying now makes it really hard to imagine how even you got exposed to computers and security. So how did that happen? Because this is a great life as a kid.
Yeah,
I think
I love that.
You get a lot of experience, but how did you end up like
by
bashing
chance,
the keyboard on a computer?
Largely by chance. So when for my 11th birthday, my dad bought me a computer. That was the kind of the first exposure I had to it, a ZX81 at the time. I started playing with doing a bit of basic programming, things like that. So when we came, that was largely how I went through high school. I was just playing around. I didn't really do computer science at high school at the time. When we came back from Brazil, I'd left school. I didn't really have any ideas of what I wanted to do. And like I say, the unemployment in Liverpool at the time was about 30%. It was ridiculous, really crazy. So I got on some, like, the government were doing lots of youth training schemes. And I went on a youth training scheme to become a COBOL programmer. So I spent a couple of years programming COBOL.
You know COBOL? You know that's a really good skill to have these.
I don't know it well enough. So this was something I learned many years ago, so I could recognize the structures.
I mean, systems running COBOL, you can just wing.
I know.
That's the worst that can happen.
Exactly, yeah. They're not important by any stretch of the imagination. So I could. If someone showed me a COBOL program today, I could talk you through it. Whereas if someone said to me, write a COBOL program, I mean, what did I used to do? I used to produce programs to do things like sort things on ISBN numbers. Writing, nothing. I mean, it's COBOL. You're not going to design a space shuttle that easily in COBOL. So that took me until I was about 18. And that's when I sort of decided that work in Liverpool was non-existent. So I decided I was going to join the army, or join up. I originally tried to join the Marines. Didn't do very well, and I injured myself. I had to wait a couple of years before I could enlist, so I did just bits and pieces. I worked as an accountant. I worked as a trainee surveyor for a building company. Lots of which I wasn't really settled very much though. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. When I'd recovered from the injury, I went back to enlist. I remember walking into the careers office. There's a big line for the Navy desk, so I was trying to join the Marines. I was like, I don't want to stand in a line. And there's a guy in the Army desk saying, why don't you come over here? I walked over, I said, can I join the army? He's like, yes, sit this test. So I joined the army. I enlisted. I originally was going to join in the infantry, but when I did the test, they were like, oh, that's quite a good score. Would you like to consider these roles, military, police, or intelligence? I was like, oh, that intelligence, that looks interesting. So I decided, I joined the intelligence corps in the army. I went through basic training. I finished basic training. I'd been posted out to my very first unit in Germany. And it was electronic warfare was the unit, which was just, there was a lot of cleaning radios, driving Land Rovers and stuff like that.
Okay,
and
so
it was, I mean, we did some fantastic stuff. We did lots of escape and evasion, which was really exciting. We did lots of interesting things because we were quite close to, although this was post-Berlin Wall, the wall had fallen.
Sorry, just to wind back the tape a little bit. What do you mean escape and evasion?
Okay, so
if it's up to me, like, you mean smuggling people through the Berlin Wall?
Not quite that much at that stage. So this was more combat survival, because the unit we were in was what was classed as prone to capture. So the role of the unit is if the war had actually happened. I mean, the Soviet Union didn't exist at this point, but the army's slow to adapt. So we were still very much we still had a large Russian presence not far away, and the unit was still going through its drills as if it was like 5 years previously when the East German army was Soviet Union there. And the role of the unit was to be quite close to the enemy positions. So the idea was we had lots of equipment, we had jammers, things like that. So if you turn a jammer on, very, very high frequency signal, saturates the waves, you're detected in about 30 seconds, and then counter artillery strikes land, and they're going to attack you. Yeah. So our unit was kind of designed to do what we call jam and scram. You turn on the jammers and try and move as quickly as possible, but with a view that at some point you're going to get overrun. And at the point of overrun, you've got to escape and evade. So you have to make your way across the countryside, hide, live off the land, that sort of thing, as you're trying to find your way out from being trapped behind enemy lines to your own forces. And we used to do a series of exercises in Germany at the time, including some very fun stuff at the NATO school for the International Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol, ILEPS, the Combat Survival Instructor School, which was quite awesome. So we escape and evade. It's basically you spend like 3 or 4 weeks getting mistreated. It's kind of the best way to describe it. You go through like a bit of training. They go through what's called conditioning, where like the hill phase, you just basically live in the cold. They don't feed you, and they just make you exercise every day to make you tired and fatigued. Because you then go into a running phase for a week where you've got to evade. So like try and get across the country. Every 12 hours you meet an agent to try and tell you where your next checkpoint is. And it's kind of to simulate like the Second World War. You imagine a downed aircraft in the Second World War, you're then following a rat line to get out of the country, that sort of thing.
Well, that sounds very intense. How many times you had to go through this?
Once.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
I guess that was enough.
100%. So it led to some of my future decisions actually, because by the end of this, I said to myself, I am never, ever, ever. I will actually kill someone before I'm forced to do this again. I will strangle someone else's eyes out. It was horrific. It was a comedy of errors. So my running phase, that week of running was just bizarre. There was one point we were doing a river crossing. So you form up a line, you take your clothes off, you hold them out of the water, you wrap them around your neck so they just stay dry. Strip off with just your boots on, link arms so you're a strong object against the flow of the river, cross the river. We're crossing a river. I was at the bottom end. The guy at the front end stumbles, pushes the second guy, pushes the third guy. So we're now all falling. These 3 let go, and I sail off down the river. So I eventually managed, I'm tumbling through this river. It's not the Rhine, but it's like one of the tributaries to the Rhine. So I managed to get myself out. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. Fortunately, my clothes have been wrapped around my shoulders. They are now sailed off into the sea. I have no clothes. I've just got a pair of boots. It's like March in southern Germany. And I'm like, this is not pleasant. But we had like, it's just a training exercise, so they're not going to let me die. So we've got like escape cards where we ring the number, ask for help. So those 3 carry on, and I'm going to ring and ask for help and be taken out of the exercise. And I was a bit worried that I'd be put back in. Because I was worried I wasn't going to be put. So if you're taken out of the exercise, you have to do the whole thing again the next year. And this is the end of 5 really annoying weeks. I didn't want to repeat. I was like, I'm never doing this again. I'm going to keep going. But I'm naked. I'm not completely at this point. So we've got a bit of Hessian, like a bit of old sack. I basically wrapped around my crotch.
Okay, wait. So when you mean nothing but your boots, that's
Literally, I had no other clothing. I just had to borrow a bit of sack that one of these guys. Every item I had on this exercise had sailed off to wherever this river was pointing out to. So it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm knocking on a farmhouse door, stark naked, speaking barely any German. It was the worst experience in the world. This farmer's there pointing a shotgun at me, shouting at me in German. I'm like, I don't speak much German. Please help. I'm really cold. Can I just use your phone? Wouldn't let me in the house, understandably. I mean, I totally get this.
There's a guy in a set.
Yeah, there's this naked guy standing there. You stand over here. He made me stand as far away from the house as he could. He rang up and arranged so they sent a rescue vehicle to come and get me. But there were like 2 hours. I'm like standing at the side of this road, shivering. When he eventually picked me up, my core body temperature had absolutely plummeted. So they go through this a medical assessment, and I was like thinking, I'm going to be taken off the exercise. They're going to say I've got hypothermia. They're going to send me off. I'm going to have to spend 2 weeks. I have to do everything all over again. I can't bring myself to do that. Really, I mean, I can't tell you how much I did not want to do this exercise again. I couldn't. I'd have left the army first. But in the end, I managed to find. So they found, like, in the medical area where we were waiting, they had like a tea urn with loads of cups of tea, and they were doing an oral thermometer. I was thinking to myself, so I basically got loads of cups of tea, drank as many as I could to make sure my mouth was really warm. Mm-hmm. The medic comes in and goes, let's check to see how you are, puts the thermometer in and goes, yeah, you look okay to go back out on the exercise. Here are some fresh clothes. Off you go. I was quite rough, but at least I got to do the end of the exercise. I was like, I just, I mean, I can laugh and joke about it decades later, but at that time I was like, I cannot do this again.
I can imagine that this
was like, no part
funny. Yeah, like standing in front of a German farmhouse begging for a phone call.
There's some fun parts of it. I mean, as you're doing the running phase, if you get captured, so as you run along, they've got like what they call hunter force who are out looking for you, which was, when I was doing it, was the Green Jackets. So there's like an infantry battalion searching the grounds, trying to catch you. You've got to evade them. If you get caught, you get taken to like a 4-hour punishment session. And I remember one of them, so I'm lying there on the ground. So I've got a sack over my head. I'm lying there on the ground, my arms stretched out, and they're pouring water on it. So I can feel the ground turning to mud, compressing. They're obviously just trying to scare you a little bit because at the end it comes out, or they hold you with a sack on your head and they roll a wheel against you while pretending to rev an engine. That sounds like a car's about to drive over you, but it's not, because car's over there, and it's how the sounds play tricks. And I was like, I can't do this again. It's horrific. Never get caught again.
No, yeah.
And
this crazy exercise is done. You say never again.
Yeah.
What was then the escape route from
basically,
this?
so I was walking past Battalion HQ, and one of the officers came out and went, what are you doing? I went, nothing, sir. He goes, do you want to do a computer course? I went, yes, that sounds interesting, sir. Off you go. You're now the unit computer security officer. They sent me away. They gave me 4 weeks training to do like computer audits and inspections and write policies and stuff like that. And I came back as the unit computer security officer. In the British Army, we do 2-year postings. So you do a job for 2 years, then a different job, then a different job. I spent the next I was in the Army for 16 years. And in that time, it was rotating in and out of a variety of some computer security roles, some physical security roles, some intelligence roles. And I'd sort of work through those sort of 3 things, doing more and more security as we progressed. But it was pure chance. If I hadn't been walking past,
they were not even aware that you had something to do with computers in the past.
No,
they were
literally,
just like, hey,
literally,
you have nothing to do. Bash on this keyboard.
100%.
Yes, sir.
100%. The fact that I knew how to use computers was not something they were aware of when they made that decision, and I did. So I was like, I did well on the course. I got a good score. So things like that meant I could progress, because when we did like promotion courses and more advanced versions of the courses, I was getting good scores on the exams, so I was able to progress through. But it was all that chance. Literally, me feeling a bit dejected, coming back from quite exhausted after a combat survival course, thinking, I don't want to do this. This place is terrible. Someone go, would you like to do a course? I went,
and so after going through all these roles, I guess you had still a future in the Army. So if you wanted to stay for forever,
yes. So my enlistment contract was up to when I enlisted, it was a 22-year contract.
Oh wow! Okay.
So you could serve. Well, you did up to your first 4 years. After 4 years, it was service 22 years, unless you wanted to leave early. I decided to leave my 16-year point. Largely because I was fed up with people trying to kill me. That kind of... It's funny to sort of explain it to people, but it's... If you'd have asked me when I was like 18, 20, I didn't understand the concept that I could be killed. Genuinely, I mean, like, sort of, we say like teenagers have got no fear of death.
Yeah.
I didn't really mentally put into my mind that.
Which is probably a healthy thing. Like
I was going to,
as a teenager or even in your 20s, you shouldn't think about dying.
It wasn't a thing. I mean, I remember every time there was like an operational deployment, I'd always volunteer for it. So I went to lots of places like Bosnia, Kosovo. I loved going to things like, I loved being in situations where people are shooting at me. I loved that sort of thing. When I got into my 30s, I was like, hang on a sec. I don't enjoy people trying to kill me anymore. This is not fun. And we had some reasonably high-profile deaths in the intelligence corps in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I was a basic training instructor for a couple of years. And when recruits that I taught started getting killed, I was like, oh, that's not nice.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah, that there's a couple of them. We lost 2 intelligence corps soldiers that I didn't enjoy at all. I mean, I don't mean, that's a really bad phrasing. We lost 2 intelligence corps soldiers that kind of made me disagree with the army quite significantly. I felt that the army's policy, so the British Army very much has a policy of soldier first. Doesn't matter what trade skills you've got, doesn't matter what experience you've got to learn to be a basic infantryman, as everyone has that requirement. I kind of understand where that comes from, but it doesn't make sense when you've got very advanced specialist skills. So we had one soldier who was a native Pashtun speaker, the only one. He was DV cleared, which meant we could use him in an intelligence environment. Yeah, he spoke native. He could understand dialects. He could understand the local dialect in the area we were operating in. That's the only person in the army who could do that. And they put him on the gate and he got killed in a rocket attack. And I'm like, if he'd been a computer, we'd have kept him in the UK with 15 rounds of fence, armed guards, under a bunker that nothing could have got near. But because it was a person, put him on his own with a flak vest. Not comfortable with that.
I see what you mean.
Little things like that became, as I started to divorce myself from, and I've never been very good at taking orders. That's always been an interesting challenge. I don't like people telling me what to do.
Also, for 16 years,
I got into a lot of trouble.
It must have been challenging.
I shouted at a lot. Was kind of the thing, just a lot. So I'd been promoted, and it kind of culminated. So I'd done some really interesting work in Northern Ireland at the time. That was coming towards an end. I'd been promoted to warrant officer, and they were like, "We need you to go back to a regular army unit." I hadn't worn uniform in years. I'd been attached to lots of other agencies doing really exciting stuff. It was like, we need you to go back to the field army as a sergeant major. And I'm like, oh, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do this. I don't want to chip people off knowing that there's realistically a chance that they're not going to come back. I'm just not, it's not me. I don't want to do that. I don't want to shout at people for their haircuts. It's not fun. So to leave the British Army, you have to give 12 months notice, which was quite challenging. So I gave my notice while I was still in Northern Ireland and didn't really do anything. So I kind of forgot about it until a month left. When I had 1 month left, and they started coming to me and saying, where do you want us to send your stuff? Because my house was an army house. They're like, where do you want us to ship your belongings? I'm like, I haven't really thought about that.
Yeah, that was not a problem before.
Yeah, I just used to go where people told me. I was like, oh no, I have to think of things myself. It was quite bizarre. So let's say we're in Northern Ireland. We had a bit of a panic. I didn't have a job. We didn't know, my wife and I, we didn't know where we wanted to live or anything like that. We were just like, what do we do? My wife's ex-army as well. So we'd kind of both been in that kind of, we just do what the army tells you to do.
She also gave in her notice about
no, she left a couple of years early. So my wife was an army nurse. She left when we had kids. Kind of sensible, became a civilian nurse. So with my last 5 weeks actually was the point we started to panic. I applied for jobs quite quickly. Fortunately enough, I got a job quite quickly. But that was a job in Liverpool. And I'd always said, when I was 18, I said, I'm never moving back to Liverpool, whatever I do. So we were there in Northern Ireland. We got a map. We put a pin in the map for where the work was. We drew out a radius that I'd be prepared to commute to work each day, and then look for houses on that radius so I could be as far away from Liverpool as possible, which is why I live in Wales now. That was.
Oh, so you bought the house that you're currently...
Not the house that I currently live in,
Okay.
but not far away. I've only moved 6 miles since leaving the army. I've just like dotted around village. So we moved from one house in the village to another house in that village.
We need more
then out.
place for the animal.
Basically, that's it. I went from a house that was in a village with neighbours, to a house that was at the edge of the village with neighbours, and now I'm in the countryside.
Okay. So that was the housing problem solved. You still need to make money at this point.
Yes. So when I left, I basically jumped to the first job that offered to me, and that was the principal inspector for the Office for Civil Nuclear Security. So I was the senior regulator for a government department that looks after the nuclear industry. I didn't last long in this job. Remember, I don't like being told what to do. Now, this is an organisation that everyone was ex-military. So the reason I got the job is the two people who interviewed me, my two senior people, the two generals that I'd worked with in the army.
Oh, okay.
I was like, hello, Sierra Leone. Get on really well. Remember that in Sierra Leone? That was quite awesome. Yeah, in Kosovo, I tell you, that's fantastic. So that was kind of the win. But it wasn't enough of a distance from the army, I think. So I worked with lots of like military police, lots of RAF police. And again, I wasn't the right cultural fit. We had a lot of disagreements on how to regulate. So there was a bit of a bust up over some of the way things should happen. And I remember coming into work one day, the director saying, "Can you come into the office for a second?" And I went to get my laptop. He says, "No, you can leave your laptop." I went, that's interesting. He goes, "Can you come and sit down?" I said, "Do I need my union rep?" He said, "Yes." I went, sit down. He goes, "You no longer work here." And I'm like, okay, that kind of sucks. I kind of get it though. So I did resist for a little bit, but it was an inevitability. Even with, we don't have a strong enough employment legislation. I'd only been there 6 months. They can literally say that. And as it turned out, they said, "You're not a good fit for this organisation. Thanks, bye." So that kind of left me. That was Christmas 2009. It was like 2 weeks before Christmas. I'm like, really don't know what to do. As you can see, my planning's not fantastic. It's quite often last minute. There's quite a lot of situations where I'm like, I need to solve this problem quite quickly. So what I did is I spoke to a couple of friends who were also in similar situations, and we formed a company called Halka Consulting, which was just the name of the town, the village that I lived in at the time. And that was kind of where I still work now. That was basically the journey into today. We started off doing penetration testing. Bizarrely.
So, okay, I can also feel the same way, because in your gimmick, I think it was more than just like, it was penetration testing. It doesn't pay that well. But I guess you're also not a big fan of the maybe.
It's not as much. I don't enjoy it as much. But it is largely the fact that it was hard. Not hard to do. This is 2010. Pen testing wasn't hard then. We didn't have to be very advanced to still find things. Remember, security wasn't great in 2010. It's quite often. I taught students on 608. It's embarrassing when I look back at what we thought was proper security 15 years ago. Like, that's just stupid. Like Stuxnet. How did Stuxnet not get detected? Little things like that. We should have done better, but we just didn't know. So it is a learning curve. We did a little bit. I found that the biggest challenge that wasn't not so much that it doesn't pay very well. It doesn't. It was really hard to win work. I found it was very, very difficult for a small company in North Wales with no real contacts, no real exposure to the industry to win work. We really
actually find projects and clients.
We were doing lots of work for small businesses. So it was very small. I think up until about 2000, with one exception actually, I did get one interesting thing I'll talk about in a second. But most of the work from 2010 to say 2012 would probably have been 30 people, organizations at most. Little things, 20 computer systems. Little bit.
Yeah. Those, especially going back to 2000.
Microsoft Small Business Server.
Yeah, it's really not much to pen test on.
Exactly. It's not fun.
It's more even like more security consulting.
Yeah.
Give some recommendations.
But that's what we were doing besides for 27001. Not fun at all. 27001 audits. Show me your policy document. Your evidence for this.
So what was the breakthrough point? How did you? Because are you still doing penetration
No.
testing in your
No,
company? So
stopped
that
that
was a moment where you had to
2013.
pivot
Yeah,
to
absolutely. So a couple of
forensics?
things led to it. Yeah. So a couple of things led to it. One of them is a friend that I knew from the army managed to get me some work with IBM, which was quite good, helping build an operational security team. So this is in the days before Iris and X-Force and all that sort of thing. There was an IBM government contract that needed someone to do incident management. And it was literally just this guy. And you said, are you interested in this role? I was like, absolutely. We'll get that contract. We'll do some work. And that kind of opened the door to doing IR for IBM on a government contract, which is kind of a big stepping stone. A big stepping stone, having gone from we just pen test small businesses to we do this now. That then led to some work with a multinational to build their CCERT, which was kind of the big one. So this was a Anglo-Dutch multinational with around 200,000 users, globally 70,000 servers, 7 global data centers. They went from having a security SOC of a completely outsourced SOC with no internal incident response, helping build them into having a functional CCERT and managing their SOC a bit better. That was kind of they were the biggest transition highlights. What we noticed as well as some of that journey through it was, like I say, lots of the pen tests we were doing, we were saying, been compromised. By the way, I've got into your web application. This is how we got in. Do you know there's already 5 shells there? They're not ours.
I don't encounter that much these days, but yeah, like it was kind of common to just run a Nessus scan or something like that. And what is this port?
Yeah.
Oh, looky, bind shell.
Yeah. Why have you got bind shell listing on there? That's not ours. It's interesting to say it's not like, it isn't that common today, but it's interesting. I shared with my class last night. Someone put on Twitter a recent pen test they'd done. They'd got a web shell. When they looked at it, when they got the first, they did a directory listing of the web shell. There were like 30 other shells there. And I'm like, oh, look at that. That's like, oh, friends. I remember those days so well. So that was, so about 2013, it was like, very much IR is the future. This is a thing that we can actually deliver. It's a thing we can be based. It's a niche we can dominate, certainly at the time. We started off doing a little bit of.
And I think it was still kind of early on for a lot of organizations to start building their IR capabilities.
That's exactly it. It was right place, right time.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It was great timing.
Digital forensics and incident response is still quite new in those days. It was certainly in the UK. I don't know globally. US maybe different.
Yeah. No, it was pretty much the same.
It was still quite new though.
We already had. I mean, it was still, I think, pretty much on like. From a forensics perspective, because about the same time I also had a couple of projects, it was more like carving. Pretty much.
That's like, basically it. Take a disk image, full disk image, file carving. That's it. That's forensics, isn't it?
Yeah. Good job.
I know, and we didn't. Like I say, it's one of those things. You look back a decade and you think that's changed significantly. I mean, I know it's a little. I know we're biased by being SANS instructors, but. For me, that's what actually got me into SANS, was that flashlight moment of seeing just how much things had changed and realizing that the small world that I'd been operating in and learning around, I could be exposed to so much more information and learn all these new things, become so much better, so much quicker. That's kind of what made me go, oh, SANS is the path.
When was the first time you had your first encounter with SANS? I think you started off facilitating a lot. I think,
no, actually, I did 3 SANS. I did 3 SANS courses before I knew facilitators existed. It was only I was talking to Tris at a 599, the 599 beta in Brussels, to try and get my very first facilitator slot after that.
599 is. I mean, I might be mistaken, but it's fairly recent. Like how old?
So that
was
like
5, 6 years?
2017.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hadn't facilitated before 2017.
Oh, okay. I don't know why I thought that you've been around since.
My very first SANS course was 511 with Eric Conrad.
Was it in London already?
Yeah, London. Okay. Yeah.
I was sitting on his 511 class the very first time he taught it in Europe. It was in Brussels.
Awesome.
I told my boss that class, I want to be there with Eric. And
that was exactly it.
Eric is just.
I needed to do the class. I needed to do it while Eric was teaching it. That was exactly. So that was that. After that, I did 508 in Sandsfire in Washington. And then I did 599 in Brussels towards, I think it was like October 2017. September 2017, like that. And that was kind of, once I'd done that one, I remember talking to Tris, found out about the work-study program, and I did loads of work-study after that. That was because I figured I paid for myself. My company funds it, so I'm self-funded. Instead of paying 8,000, I could pay 2,000. I could do 4 SANS courses for the price of one. I will do 4 SANS courses a year minimum.
It was really. I mean, even today, it's a really good deal.
That was the big thing. I mean, I enjoyed doing it. I enjoyed the work. I enjoyed being a facilitator.
And when was the moment when someone, maybe I don't know how it happened, but someone approached you like, hey, you look like kind of smart. You know how to use a computer. You want to be an instructor, or how did that happen? Or you just said to someone like, I'm interested in this.
Very much thingy? Me pushed it. So I got the email when I did the 5-8 exam.
I'm very glad that SANS is not sending out that automated email with Stephen Norcott's name. I think Stephen already left SANS and they were still sending out the automated email. And a lot of people were like, oh, wow, I got this email from Stephen Norcott. Like, that's an auto reply kind of thing. Like, after you complete the course with, for the GIAC exam.
Yeah, if you got 85% on the GIAC exam, you got the automated email. I got that, and I was like, I didn't respond straight away. So I got that, and it was like about 3. In fact, it was 599. So I'd got that when I did the GCFA. When I did 599, sat that, and I was like, I was sort of doing that, and I was just thinking, I was talking to Eric on Buggenhout, who was teaching it. I was like, thinking, this is quite interesting. He's a fantastic instructor. His personality is amazing. Talking to Tris, I was finding more out about SANS, and that's when the conversation came up about how instructor dev worked. And I was like, oh yeah, I remember getting that email. Maybe I'll reach out and ask. So I did. I was just like, look, I got this email like 6 months ago. I'm really interested. 508 is very similar to my day job. These are the reasons why I think I'd be a good fit. It was Gareth Dance at the time. Gareth reached out. I did 504 a couple of months later in London. So I went and had a chat with Gareth. I'd met him a couple of times on other events, explained what I was interested in. And that kind of coalesced into, here is the program we will take you on. It's interested in instructor dev. There are periods of silence, and then forensic activity, then silence.
Yeah, I think that's getting better significantly.
Absolutely.
Since then, but I know the feeling. Yeah.
I still think it's not, and this isn't necessarily a criticism of it. I think the reality is no two people go through the same program. Everyone goes through a different journey. Yeah, that's true. And I get why, but I think that's something, if we could make people aware of that earlier on, because people think I'm going to follow this process, not realizing that's their process. Someone else who could start instructor dev on the same day has a different process.
Yeah.
And I think that leads to a lot of upset people.
Yeah, because they're not getting any feedback maybe.
Yeah,
on like, okay, this is how it's going to proceed, and like you said, there's a lot of.
I think that is being improved. Absolutely. But I know, so I spoke to people, certainly.
So you were also stuck for a while, and you were also in the situation.
Yeah.
Like,
so
what's going to happen now?
There was at least, when I applied, they were like, yeah, fine, we'll set something up. And I didn't hear anything for 13 months. Now, I didn't mind because I had a job, so I was like, oh, whatever, if that happens, it happens. But 13 months, I mean, as far as I'd got to the point where I was like, clearly they're not interested. And then it was at the 13-month point, they're like, are you still interested? I'm like, yes. And I did a couple of TAs. I started rolling into a few teaching assistants. That was kind of how it got started again. But I do find it interesting because
when was it when you started the instructor dev? And
so I first applied
I'm having a hard time now following the timeline.
Okay, so I applied for instructor dev.
17 and then
2007, December 2017. I applied for instructor dev.
Okay, yeah.
My very first TA was March 2019. Mm-hmm. So that the year 2018, I just did SANS courses. Every SANS course I went on, I'd ask. People would go, yeah, we'll get back to you. I kind of understand that. That was a bit silent. But in 2019, it changed quite dramatically. I did quite a few TAs in 2019.
The ball started rolling, and then
the ball started rolling.
Boom!
At the speed of light. Yeah, but that's what. So when the ball started rolling for me at the speed of light, I did loads of TAs in 2019, including ones for other courses, which is quite good because I got to see loads of things, loads of teaching styles. I did the amazing training with David Holzer. That was the best instructional training I've ever had. He's a fantastic person anyway.
Was it? It wasn't the Long Island.
No, I did it
Yeah.
in London.
I think we only had one Long Island training
Yeah,
session. I feel very lucky that I was one.
Oh,
of
I'm
the
so jealous.
participants.
No, I'm so jealous.
But it was so hard.
Yeah.
After a day, we were just going to the hotel bar, order the whatever they had. I think they had like burgers and something like that, and everyone is like, "Okay, let's do the homework now." And it was, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a ton.
I'd love to do something like that. Mine was in London.
Did you get a chance to actually teach before the pandemic hit, or?
Yes.
Okay, so at least like that, it's
So
I'd
gone through. I did the very first module teach. So I taught an element of it with Nick Klein to go through that, and then I did the murder board in London in January 2020.
Okay.
So,
but no solo teach or co-teach. So
not
you
at
still
that
had
point.
to do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
So those were, I guess, online.
Yeah, post murder
then.
board. Yeah.
Okay.
So I did that. I did the murder board. I say there's things that really stand out to me. So I was Alyssa Torres. So I'm teaching about 508. I'm doing the memory forensics element of 508, talking about how e-process and DLL lists work and e-process block. And I get to a point. Alyssa just goes, "Are you sure? Are you sure about that?" And I went, "Not anymore." No, just such a simple sentence. Crushed. I'm like, how do I cope with this? I'm like, I've got to try and recover. Lenny Zeltzer was asking me questions, and I was like talking about. I was like, "Oh no, don't."
Yeah,
ask me about
the
malware."
funniest part in the murder board is that you would think that everyone has an assigned role, but no, they rotated.
Yeah, they just messed me. I was like, oh. I had Ian Reynolds kept standing up and taking phone calls. To be fair, my murder board wasn't horrific. Right, I didn't. I've heard some stories about.
Oh no,
murder
you
boards.
do. I mean, the name is probably
Yeah,
worse than what they actually
absolutely.
do to you. But boy, some of those little nasty things and tricks that they do to you, and
it's exactly. I mean, I could have coped with a fist fight. I could have coped with students punching each other better than Alyssa saying, "Are you sure?"
Yeah,
that was just like my entire world collapsed. I was like, such a simple sentence. I'm like, but anyway, that went well. Fortunately, so I did my 2 co-teachers, but yeah, they were completely online. First one was with Jason, second one was with Chad.
Oh, that's
quite nice. I mean, that was awesome. So 2 awesome people to sort of go through this with.
So then that means that because you're an author of 608, now you're writing of, if I remember correctly, the Linux forensics one?
Well, Linux incident response.
Incident response, sorry. Yeah.
Right.
It's not still in the catalog, so
No.
the title is but it's already fixed, so it's going to be Linux.
Hopefully.
Okay.
So it's more like 508 than 508.
So those are still fairly, one is in development, the other
Yeah.
one is fairly recent. So when did you start working on those? Like
Again, chance and luck. So in 2000, I was doing some work for Jake Williams, and some others. I was doing some contract work, and it led to some very vocal arguments, discussions I had at SANS events about Linux. So this was 2020. So I was intermittently teaching 508 at the time, mostly online. The other advantage I had, and what changed my instructor journey, is that being in the UK, when they did the return to live, I was the only 508 instructor in the UK.
So you got all the.
I could go very back to in-person teachers very quickly. We had lots of students. We could ramp through that very, very fast for a popular course. That was right place, right time, 100% on that one. While this was going on, I was talking about Linux security. That's when Mike and Matt reached out to me and said, "We're writing this course. We'd like someone to write a bit of a module about Linux IR." And we'd just done quite a large case with a very complex Linux intrusion, which I'd been ranting about to people about Linux security and the things everyone got wrong. They were like, you've been quite vocal about this. Put your money where your mouth is, write it down. Okay, I will write this course. And that was quite good. So that's also where I think I got certified. I think that I'm not necessarily putting myself down, but I think the speed to certification was because they wanted me to be able to teach 2 courses. I've got to be certified to do. So there's that element.
Or you were maybe just ready. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe you're fit for the whole thing.
I was going to say I had. So don't get me wrong. I had done 7 individual. I had done 7 solo teachers at this point. So I'm not saying that I was advanced, but I think so. I know other people. There's other people in instructor dev who started before me. Have done lots of teachers and haven't yet certified. And I don't think it's necessary.
But like you said, everyone has a different.
Everyone has a different path. Exactly.
Looking back, I also realized that the pace that I was progressing was probably the pace that I
Yeah.
to get where I'm at.
Exactly, and
Okay,
I
so
think actually
it's fine.
that's a very relevant point, because I think exactly for me, the pace that I went through was the right pace for me. There are some people who might maybe want to do a teach every 6 months, whereas had quite high availability. I was more than okay to do almost like 2 teachers a month, and that means you're going to go through it faster. There's no escaping that. If you're teaching,
I mean, can also have the downside of it that you're just not able to kind of process what went wrong with the previous teach, because you need to do the grind. Basically.
Yeah, you've got to get through things, and that's why I also get the fact that the sort of like they want you to do about 6 teachers first. I understand that makes sense. I think if you only done 1 or 2 teachers,
that's not. I mean, for me, I think after 2 years, I kind of felt comfortable on my setup, how I deliver. I know how I like to do things.
I still get nervous even now.
And even after that, you always make small adjustments.
Yeah, all the time.
I probably should try this instead of that. See if that works.
That's what I like about SANS, though, because we teach the same material every week, but every class is different.
Absolutely.
And I love that. I love the fact that every class has got different dynamics, different questions. You've got students with different needs. You've got different problems to solve every time.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the class management part is you never know when like black smoke comes through the window, some weird noise that you are not able to
strange noise in the rooms. And you think, how do I deal with this new problem? Your projector goes off. It's just everything is just exciting.
I think that there's also, this is something that developed a bad habit of me. When the fire alarm goes off, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna wait a few more seconds, see if we have a chance to die and burn here. No, it went off again, so like, okay, cool.
I am absolutely like that as well. I'm like, I'll let the fire alarm. I did it. Where was I? It was one of the teachers. I think it might have been a teacher in Paris. Teacher in Paris. The fire alarm went off in a hotel. I was like, I don't care about this. It's gonna be pointless. It's going off like a minute or so, and I'm like, I'm just gonna keep talking. Students get a bit nervous. I'm like, don't worry, it's a false alarm.
That's always the first reaction. Like, there's a loud noise, I can overshout it.
Yeah.
And you can't. But your first thing is like, I can work through this. And then you're like, well, okay, 10 more minutes until we hit the break time. So,
we'll just
it makes
keep
sense
going
for an earlier break.
Until I smell smoke and see flames, I'm not going to assume there's a fire. And it turned out to be a false positive, as always. But I was like, maybe that's not the right attitude.
I'm always afraid, like, I probably should have like a timer set.
Yeah, okay, let's just see, is that going on?
It's more than that, then
it's
going to lead. Okay, so right now you're working on that class.
Yes.
The Linux class.
Yeah.
Do you already have a course code, or it's not?
577. So it's Forensics 577.
That's a good course code. It's easy to remember. Aside from that, are you working on anything exciting that will be available later for the wider public to try out?
I'm actually
projects, tools, whatever, or
not really projects, tools. There's a night talk I want to try and put together, so I'm just waiting for some clearance. So I did a consultant engagement for incident response for a company. That was a European metallurgical research firm. Now, their attack is identical to the law we use in Stark Research Labs. Identical. The attackers even used sys backup folders. They created folders with the IP addresses on. It was so similar. I mean, from an IR point of view, if you've done 508, it was 2 seconds work because you knew exactly where to look. It was just easy. It was the easiest IR I've ever done. But it was so play-by-play similar. And there was some interesting things like, one of the fun things is there was an attacker Cobalt Strike beacon on a device that every time it fired, Sophos antivirus on the endpoint killed it. But it was only writing the logs locally, so no one noticed this was happening for 9 months. We've got but the Sophos antivirus logs give us a timestamp for 9 months every time this beacon fired. And we could put that into like Aurora or something that shows the timeline. And it's consistently Monday to Friday, 2 a.m. UTC to 10 a.m. UTC. There's a big spike of activations, like once a second. From 10 a.m. until 2 a.m. the next morning, it's once every 10 minutes. So that's obviously heartbeat into active, into heartbeat. It doesn't run at weekends. It doesn't run in public holidays in a certain region that we assume is in a roughly UTC plus 6 or 7 time zone. And it's just, that sort of thing was just, everything about this case could have been the 508. I was just like, this is fascinating. I want to try it. So I'm hoping I'm just waiting for them to check through some of the things that I'm going to say because
if you're allowed to
disclose,
disclose,
because it was quite a horrific exfiltration.
There's
lots of data went.
Oh, that sounds pretty interesting.
It was quite bad. Yeah,
but there's a good chance that they will approve at least part of it.
So the bits that I've said so far are definitely approved. I just want to be able to put some detail in because clearly, if I just say that, that's like a 5-minute presentation. No one's going to care. Oh, that's interesting. It was really like 508. We just don't care. I want to try and be able to take some screenshots and maybe obfuscate some of the things.
Well, maybe.
Well, internal IP addresses I don't care about. And the C2 infrastructure's crashed now as well. So I don't mind that. I just some of the tools that they've got failed quite badly as well, and I don't know if I can name them for that.
You mean like controls?
They've got a very expensive network security tool that didn't do what it promised in quite a bad way.
Yeah, that's always a touchy area. So that's probably worth.
Yeah, I'm keen to not get sued. Yeah, I'm keen not to go to prison or lose all my house and stuff like that.
Yeah, I can understand. All right, cool. I'm looking forward to seeing that one. Hopefully, it will come through soon. We're also, I think, dangerously running out of time. Thank you very much for your time. It was fantastic. So
no worries. Thank you. I like talking about myself.
Okay, then we'll do a part 2 and explore the other details. Thank you, and well, like I said, can't wait to see the course coming out and this new presentation.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be fantastic, and you're definitely invited to be one of the beta students.
Okay, cool.
I think you would be excellent at that.
We'll try my best. All right, awesome. Thanks you.
Thank you very much.